few napkins, with this here nose. All right, good deal. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is good to be back again today. Thank the Lord for another opportunity to come to church. This morning, what we're going to be looking at, we're starting a new chapter. So we finished up the one on giving. Everybody go, whew, okay. But no, I'm just playing. But what we're looking at is our lesson title is entitled Returning. Our scripture is taken from the book of Ezra, and it'll be taken from chapters 1 and chapters 3. What we're looking at for the next few weeks is after the exile. And it asks a question right here. It says, when was the last time you studied the books like Ezra, Nehemiah, and Haggai? Many of them confess that we never have. They deal with an obscure area of biblical history, and some of their elements cause Christians to cringe. But that's what we're going to be looking at. We'll be looking at post-exilic Israel. It says, after decades of captivity, some of the people who returned remember Jerusalem and the glorious temple. And we're looking at their coming back to Israel after being exiled. So basically what we're looking at is almost what you would call the second Exodus. You know, we think of Exodus and you think of, the Israelites leaving Egypt. Well, this is kind of, and in many ways it resembles it. Maybe not to that scale, but it is the second leaving. They're leaving Babylon this time, coming back to Israel, coming back home. What we're looking at this morning is entitled Returning, and it asks the questions: how can I mark the milestones of my spiritual journey? How can I mark the milestones of my spiritual journey? And it says, for the next 4 weeks, we'll study Old Testament passages that deal with a pivotal time in the nation of Judah. The return of many Jews from exile in Babylon. This portion of the Bible might be unfamiliar to some. But when we think about the issues at the heart of the Jews' return to their homeland, we find these issues are more familiar than we thought. It says, think about the questions that those Jewish people may have asked themselves. It said, and like I say, we're coming back from exile. It says, some of the questions they could have asked is, how could God have allowed us to suffer so many years of exile? How can we really go home again? What's the old saying? You can never go home again. And what will home look like now? It's been many years. I think they said like about 70 years. It says, are we up to the challenges we find once we get to our homeland? Who will step up and lead us in facing those challenges? So there were a lot of questions going through their mind. It says, when we realized that ancient Jews were asking these kinds of questions, we sensed that this unit might not be so dry and laborious after all, because we're asking ourselves the same questions today. To give you a little bit of backstory, what we look at, we need to remember two key events of the history of Judah. First, 587 BC, Judah was captured by the nation of Babylon under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. It says, at this time, many were exiled to Babylon. Second, we're looking at 539 BC. The Babylonians were conquered by the Persians under King Cyrus. It was Cyrus who decreed that the Jews in exile were free to go home. Ezra records this event in the book that bears his name, and we will study this return from Babylonian captivity for the next 4 weeks. So this is, to give you a little bit of backstory, this is what we're looking at. They have been exiled to Babylon, many of the Jews. Jerusalem is in ruins. The temple is gone. The altar torn up. Basically, the picture I get of Jerusalem is like a ghost town. Kind of like you'd see in an old Wild West movie where the tumbleweeds are blowing through, you know. Jerusalem is in shambles. These people have been in captivity for all these years. Now the tides have turned, and this king who has conquered Babylon says, okay, you can go home. What I think of is, you know, several things. You know, one, you've got, it's been, let's say, close to 70 years. So a lot of the ones who had originally been exiled have passed on. So think about a lot of these people who are in Babylon, that's their life. That's what they're used to. It's kind of like somebody who comes in from another country at this day and time. Once they're here for a while, this becomes their home. So when he says, you know, you can go home, a lot of them don't, because this is home. You've got a lot of them who say, and it says about 50,000, that say, yeah, we want to go back. But think about what they see when they get there. It's not like they left it. It's a wasteland. It's in shambles. Not everybody was taken. Not everybody was captured and sent to Babylon. So you got many who never left. Many who suffered even, I guess you could say, suffered even worse than the ones in exile because they were left behind. They were left behind with city all torn all to pieces. They didn't have anything. They didn't have means. So they've had a rough time too. So you got kind of three classes of people here that when you're looking at a homecoming, it's kind of like three different avenues of that homecoming. So it's a series of journeys, I guess you would say. That's what it says here in the teacher's book, series of journeys. So you look at three different aspects of this journey. And it says life is a series of journeys. Most of us have traveled through an educational journey. We were born toddlers. We go to kindergarten, elementary school.
Well, kindergarten wasn't always there.
That wasn't always, but what I say. I understand, but when I say kindergarten, I mean elementary school. Then you go to middle school, high school. This coming from my teacher. Says we started as children in preschool, then kindergarten or first grade. We finished as adults after our senior year or after earning a college degree. Then and series of journeys. You know, many of us went on to college after high school. Many of us went on to a vocational skill. Many of us went to a vocational school. So, and entered the workforce. So, a series of journeys. And you think about those journeys. After that, you know, many of us, you know, met another person, we got married. Another journey. Yeah, some of us, in our case, some of us went back to school and tried another career. Yes. Then kids come, another journey. So, you know, and you're raising kids, but it's another new journey. And then grandkids, here we are, in mine and my wife's case, grandkids, another new journey. And you know, retirement, very scary, but another journey. So life is a series of journeys. What we're looking at here today is part of the Israelites' journey. This is a new chapter. They're turning a new chapter. 70 years they've been in exile in Babylon. So it's a lifestyle that they've grown accustomed to. Now they say, okay, you go home. So here we are turning another page. It says, what are some of the different kinds of journeys that we take? And I've just mentioned that. I'm getting ahead of myself. But we've just mentioned that, you know. But educational, vocational.
Yeah, I'm going home tomorrow, actually. And
Right.
it's the same kind of thing. I haven't been here in 3 years. I'm not going home to what I know because my parents have passed, my brother's passed, my son has passed.
Yes.
Not going home to my grandparents' house, or not going home to big family meals. I'm
Right.
going to see cousins and aunts and uncles. So it is very different, and things are built up, and you get on the phone, and going from here to there, it doesn't seem like another country, but the food is different,
Yeah.
the talking is different, the affection is different, the celebration of the time is different, the buildings are different, the houses are different, and the family setting is different. So that's a whole nother journey too, when you learn to be honoring.
Yes. So you can relate to the passage that we're talking about this morning
Very
because
much so.
you're going back.
I'm
Going back to something that's not going to exactly be the same as it was, but you're going back.
Yes.
It's just think of other journeys, and we touched on some of those relationships, and not just relationships. In other words, getting married, yes, that's another journey. But how about friendship relationships that end? Different journey. Geography, as we said, moving to a different place. Totally, it's like moving to a different world. And I also touched on aging, retirement. That can be very scary because it's a change, a very big change. Change. That's a lot of, and that's what you could say is change. This is what they're looking at, change.
Yeah, because they're not going home to kids they grew up with or their grandparents either, because half them people have passed on.
Right.
Or their childhood friends probably won't be there anyways because everybody's been exiled for so long.
Right.
Who knows what pieces of their families left?
Yeah.
And the people that were left behind are probably feel a little bit bitter towards them because they were left there.
And we're going to look at some of that too. And the bitterness, when we look at those who came back, those who were exiled and came back,
Probably have it both ways.
didn't help the bitterness. If anything, they really didn't. And you can, I'm thinking about that this morning, you can see that even today.
I think they felt like it was kind of like rubbing in their face that they didn't get left behind, that the other ones did.
Yeah.
That's what I took from it.
But what we're looking at this morning is, like I said, it's taken from the book of Ezra. And I'm going to read it from my Bible. And this is the NIV. This is a student edition. First, we're looking at chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. It says, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of earth and has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any one of his people among you, may his God be with him, and let him go to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem. And the people of any place where survivors may now be living are to provide him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will of offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. So Cyrus is saying, you who have been exiled, you're free to go. And there's, like I said, you can see many similarities in this Exodus as you do in Egypt. He tells them you're free to go, and instructs them that, they are to give them gifts, for the temple, gifts, for them, livestock, so that they can keep going. And you look at Cyrus, and some of the question may be, well, is Cyrus, does he believe in Jesus and in God? Not Jesus hadn't come back, but does he believe in God? Is he a worshiper? Is he a Christian? No, because you can also go back and see where he does this for many other people who worship other gods. And when you look at in part of verse 3, he says, and build a temple of the Lord to God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem. God is in heaven, but the temple's going to be in Jerusalem. So he didn't really get it, but there again, God is using somebody who doesn't believe, who is not a Christian, not a believer, and says, he's using them to get his work done, as he does today, as he's done all throughout history. In other words, God can use you no matter what. And he's going to get his plan done no matter what. With or without you. That's right. Whether you believe or not. That's exactly right. God can still use people. We pick it up in chapter 3. And this will be chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. It says, when the 7th month came, and the Israelites, they're already here, they're already back. It says, when the 7th month came, and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, son of Jozadak, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of God for Israel, to sacrifice burnt offerings on it, in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Despite their fear of the people around them, they built the altar on its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. After that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifices, and the sacrifices for all of the appointed sacred feasts of the Lord, as well as those brought as freewill offerings to the Lord. It says, on the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. So here we see the Israelites have come back. They're back in Jerusalem, not like it was when they left. It's far worse. City's in shambles. Temple has not been built. They rebuilt the altar. And they're trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I say that as I was reading this morning, I think about us. And, COVID. So for 2 years or better, things made an abrupt change. So now we're kind of getting back into the swing of things, or getting back in the swing of things. But I was talking to somebody last night. Things are still not the same. They're not as they were. A lot of the things that we were doing before COVID, we still don't do now. And it's not, what they're doing is getting back to what they did. You look at the morning and afternoon sacrifices, the Feast of the Tabernacles. So they're trying to get back to the way it was. They're trying to get back to their religious practices the way they did before. Things that may have kind of gone by the wayside, starting to do them again now. And I thought about us as we, after the COVID, we're starting to do a lot of the things that we didn't. We're starting to gather closer than we did before. Also, Susan, as you mentioned, there were ones that didn't leave. And this, I thought it touched on this, but it doesn't. But it did in part of the books that I read this morning. So the ones that didn't leave, they didn't get exiled, but they were left in a city in ruins. They didn't have anything. But it says that they continued to worship. Even with the altar torn down, they continued to worship. So when we have these others that come in from exile, who are rebuilding the altar, you have these who never left. But like I said, in some respects, they had it just as bad, if not worse, than the ones in exile, because they were left with nothing, no means, and they had to survive. So it says that when the ones that came back were rebuilding the temple, these who never left came in and said, look, let us help. We want to be a part of it, because even when y'all were in exile, we didn't stop worshiping. Well, it says that the ones that came back says, well, that didn't count. Basically, you didn't do it right. That didn't count. And no, you can't help us do this. You know, we're the chosen people. You can't help us do this. I'm like, still didn't get it. This is the second, Exodus. So they've been exiled twice. And here you come back and you say, these others ask, let us be a part of it. No. So yes, right, kind of a slap in the face. But it is what but these that did come back, trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. The first part, why do you think God inspired Cyrus to let the Jews return to Jerusalem? So, in other words, just like we said, his plan is going to come to fruition, whether it be from somebody, a worshiper, or somebody who is not. In other words, God can use whomever he chooses, and he does choose to use people who have no clue what they're doing, such as the case of Cyrus. God's going to get his work done. It says Cyrus apparently did the same thing for other exiled nations in his new empire. So was Cyrus a believer? I don't think so. It does not look like that.
I think Cyrus felt like this was going to be in his name.
Right.
And he was going to take recognition for this, even though the Lord had other plans. This is the way I took it.
Yeah.
Cyrus is saying, okay, well, I sent these people here to build a temple because I told them to.
Right. And as we look in the second part of chapter 3, it says, why might the Jews have wanted to rebuild the altar in the 7th month? Traditionally, the 7th month was the Feast of the Tabernacles. So they're trying to get back to the way things were, worshiping the way they used to. Yeah. It says, why might they have wanted to erect the altar on the same foundation as the old? There again, trying to get back to the way things were. And it says right here, it says, the leaders of the returnees understood the importance of marking milestones for the journey. The wilderness journey, their earlier life in Jerusalem, the time of exile, and the events that led to their return to Jerusalem were all part of their journey of faith. Said it was important for the nation to remember their history. It's also important for us to remember our own history and to note milestones that are significant, events that have marked our lives and made us who we are today. And I did think about this, and this is true. As we get older, you do tend to think back on how it was. We just had a class reunion a couple weeks ago. So me and Karen have been pulling out the yearbooks several times, thumbing through there, and looking at people and things that were going, and you remember how those things were. Some good, some not so good, but you remember. I find myself doing that a lot, and the older I get, the more I do it. You think back as to how things were. My brother, who's been passed now for 2 years, I think back, and I can remember how we used to work together. I remembered a lot of the old sayings that he did, I have now, but I remember that. And a lot of times when you use that saying, you think, yep, that's him. You remember back to these things. The same way with our church family. We've got this grand new building, but I can remember back when we had the other small building. That when we gathered, we were gathering like this because they didn't have a lot of room.
Lord help them in that little kitchen.
That's what, that's exactly what I mean.
In them little bitty classes.
Right. But you remember.
Also in the classrooms, I was sitting there trying to cook
Yeah.
breakfast or, you know, or just.
But there was still,
all
but
comments or whatever, we were just all squeezed.
right, but there was still a closeness.
Yeah.
There was still a closeness. And you remember those times.
Probably would be.
I can remember so many of those things. Last night we had the trunk or treat for Halloween, and we had all the kids coming out, and it was just a grand time. And we've got this beautiful new playground out here that the kids can enjoy. And they were climbing on Noah's Ark and hanging out of the windows and sliding down the slides, and you can't help but think, you know, I can remember when we were doing this. I remember my sister who was, you know, imperative about this playground. And I got Karen to take a picture last night that we've got the stone out there that commemorates the playground in her honor. So you take a picture of the stone, and then in the background you can see the ark and the playground full of kids playing. And you remember, it makes you go back and remember. It does. It makes you feel, it count your blessings. Yes. It makes you look back at these milestones, you look back at these things, and you count your blessings. And there again, a lot of them weren't all that great. I mean, a lot, you know, in other words, there are a lot of good times, which I have mentioned. There are a lot of sad times, a lot of hard times. But you still think back, and just, you know, you think about these Israelites. They look at the exile in Egypt, which they remember. You know, we still celebrate the Passover now. The exile from Babylon, the exile into Babylon. They remember all that. So some of these times are not all that good, but you need to remember them, because it's part of growing up. It's part of your life, part of your history, part of your Christian journey. So we need to be aware of them. We need to remember them. A lot of times so that we don't repeat them.
They weren't strangers that left them. They were their cousins and,
Right.
you know, cities where everybody knew everybody before they left.
Right.
So this wasn't like somebody you didn't really know that just left you. This was your family that left you.
Right. And like I said, you know, here they are coming back, and you think, you know, the others came to them and says, you know, we want to help. And they said, no. You know, well, we've been worshiping, but you weren't doing it right. That doesn't count. And you think, that's why I say you need to go back and remember these milestones, these hard times, so that you don't repeat them. So that you learn from them. In conclusion, I know I may be running long. I can't find my watch. Don't know where it went to. Been looking for it for 2 weeks. It says, as we begin this study of the Jews returning to their homeland, we realize how uncertain and even fearful they may have felt. Those who decided to make the trek were entering murky water. It seems that nearly everyone who follows God of the Bible eventually ends up in murky waters. We have doubts. We're not sure if it's really God who's calling us and leading us. We wonder if we're up to the task before us. Like those Jews in Babylon, we have to read about the ancient journeys of our spiritual forebears, but we're not sure if we want to take the journey ourselves. And God seems to be awfully silent and distant much of the time. Like those Jews from long ago, we have to decide if we're going to take the leap of faith and make the journey to hunker down and stay where we are. It's not an easy decision, and Jesus would tell us to count the cost before you begin. And I'm going to read the prayer that we have here. It says, Lord, as we begin this study of the ancient Jews going back home, teach us the truths we need to learn about our own journey with you. Like them, we would like more answers and certainty, but we want to learn to walk by faith. We are your people, and we are glad. Amen. Thank you all.